Hi, welcome to the How Do I video series on Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. My name is Mark Brummel and I'm an MVP for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. I will be presenting how do I implement the job queue entry pattern in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. This video is made in collaboration with Plataan, a Microsoft Dynamics Learning Center from Belgium, and Microsoft. At the end of this video you will have an idea on how to implement the job queue entry pattern in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. The objective of this video is to first look at design patterns as a concept, and then look at the design pattern in the standard application. At the end of this video we will make our own job queue entry solution. Design patterns are common solutions or best practices to solve problems. This is a well-known concept in computer programming and can therefore be applied to Dynamics NAV as well. This video is part of a series around design patterns in Dynamics NAV, and during this video I will reference to other patterns and videos. In this video we will be going through 3 easy steps. The first step will be looking at the job queue entry pattern in the standard application. In step 2, know the pattern, we will look at how the pattern is implemented in the application. And in step 3, we will create the pattern in our own application. In Microsoft Dynamics NAV, the job queue can be used to run processes in the background or to run processes asynchronously. One of the standard processes in the job queue that's shipped with the product is asynchronously posting sales and purchase documents. This is what we're going to look at and replicate in this video. For more information about this process, I would like to reference to the video How do I configure and use the background posting feature in Microsoft Dynamics NAV, which uses this pattern too. If the feature is enabled, each time we post a sales document, an entry is created in the job queue. Let's have a look at how that works. For this we make a new sales order. We just pick an item from the database, and we select post, and Microsoft Dynamics NAV tells us that the job has been scheduled. And we can see, if we look in the job queue entries, that the system created a job queue that tells the system to run code unit 88 and post sales order 101. This job queue entry will be executed as soon as the job queue is running. Let's have a look at how this works from a technical perspective. What we do is creating a wrapper around the main process that would normally be executed real time. In the first step, we have some options to pre-process data. We can test for mandatory or optional parameters, read the parameters, and if required, read the record that is necessary for the job. When this is done, we can do additional pre-processing on the data. This would be processing that is not done on the normal main process. Then the main process kicks in. The key to using this pattern is not to change the main process. And when the main process is finished, we can do some cleanup if it's required. Although it might be tempting, the main process should never be duplicated. This would result in unnecessary overhead and reduce the maintainability of our application. Let's go in the Dynamics NAV development environment and look at the process that we just used. This is code unit 88, sales post via job queue. Please notice the naming of the object. This is a combination of the process it runs, sales post, and via job queue, which makes it easy to recognize for anyone what this code unit does. If you implement this naming convention, other developers will understand what you are trying to achieve. The parameter for the code unit is a job queue entry record. This contains the information we need. It's the contract. The first step in the code unit is testing the mandatory parameters. It gets the record to process, and then it does some additional processing that you don't need when manually posting a sales document. The next step is the main process, posting and printing, and depending on the outcome, it processes data. To see how this job queue entry is created, we need to go and find code units 81 and 82, sales post yes no and sales post and print. Both code units are executed from the user interface and based on the setup of the system, post the document synchronously or asynchronously. This is done in both code units. Let's go to the function that queues the sales document. This is a function within code unit 88 that is executed from the job queue. In this code unit, it creates the job queue entry and it prepares the actual job. At the end of the process, the job queue and queue process is executed. This code unit is part of the code units in the job queue, and what it does is inserting the record and, if required, start the job. Here we can also see that if the job queue is not running, the user gets the message that the job is scheduled but will not be executed. Let's see how we can implement this pattern in our own application. In our example application, we have example documents. And example documents can be posted, and during posting we can select if we can post it as a song or a dance, or a song and a dance. Let's create an asynchronous process for this. The first step would be to create a new code unit. We will call this code unit example post via job queue, so everyone understands what it does. The code unit is based on the job queue entry as a contract. And it has 4 steps: test data, get data, process, and clean up. In our code unit, we have created 4 functions, so it's very clear what it does, and which part belongs to which process. This makes the code unit easier to read and maintain. In the function testData, all we do is test if the job queue entry has a record ID to process. In the next step, getData, we will get the record reference of the record ID to process and put it in a variable of the type example document. Before we can implement the process step, we first have to create two fields in the example document table. If we look at the sales header, we can see that there are two fields, job queue status and job queue entry ID. These two fields are required to make the functionality work. So basically what we do is copy the fields and we would paste them in the example document table. Because there is code in the fields, before we can save the table, we have to disable the code because the fields are not yet active in the database. After we save the table, we can enable the code, compile the object, and now we have the necessary fields to go back to the example post via job queue code unit. In the process function, we call a function set job queue status. This field sets the job queue status, a field that we just copied and pasted from the sales header. If we want to see which statuses are available during programming, there is a simple trick of fooling the compiler. Compile the object, and Microsoft Dynamics NAV will say that the existing options are scheduled for posting, error, or posting. During the process function, we set the status to posting and we run the example post process. If that doesn't execute, the job queue status is set to error and we throw an error with the last error text. The last step, cleanup, is only executed if there is no error in the process, and it sets the job queue status to blank. To enable the example documents to be posted through the job queue, we have created a new code unit called example post and queue. Separating this function from the job queue posting will make future maintenance of the application easier, and it will be more clear to others what the separate code units do. This code unit is called with an example document as a contract, and it calls the enqueue document. Before creating this function, we first have to implement the setup options. In the sales and receivable setup, there are a number of fields that tell the system if the posting is done synchronously or asynchronously. In the standard application, it is also possible to post and print asynchronously. Our example documents do not have a print option. So to enable the asynchronous posting process, we have only copied the fields that are related to the posting process. And we have put them on the page object, so the end user can set the options. Once this is done, we can finish the enqueue process. This process creates the job queue entry and it sets the job queue entry ID in the example document. The last step is to tell the system if the asynchronous posting is activated to call the code unit example post via job queue instead of the example post code unit real time. This is done in the example post yes/no code unit. In the function post a document, we get a reference of the example setup, and if the asynchronous posting is enabled, we enqueue the document. To help tell the user what the status of the example document is, we have also added the job queue status to the example documents list. Let's test the functionality we just created. Before we set up the asynchronous posting, we create a new job queue category. Example posting. When this is done, we go to the example setup. We enable posting with the job queue and we select example posting as a job queue category. If we now go to our example document, we select post, we can see that we get the same message that the job has been scheduled and will not be run because the job queue is not running. The document is scheduled and the status is scheduled. And if we now go to the job queue entries, we can see that our job queue is scheduled to post and the object to run is example post via job queue. In this video we have learned how to implement the job queue pattern in Microsoft Dynamics NAV. We have seen how this is implemented in the standard application, and we have seen how to create our own implementation of this pattern. Thanks for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in another episode of the How Do I video series for design patterns on Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015.